Hey, everybody. Welcome to the For the Love podcast. I think I'm laughing because this interview, I just did not expect it. I did not expect this to go the way that it went. And it is like, well, I'm just glad you're here. You're about to have the best listening experience. Let me tell you about our guest today. So first of all, this is a show that's hooked into the Jen Hatmaker Book Club. You know, we always interview our author of the month, whoever of our book selection, which is such a special feature of book club, just to have that sort of up close access, not just to the book, but to the book's author every single month. It's my favorite thing. And so we had a banger of a book this month, and I'm sure a bunch of you have read it. It's called All the Colors of the Dark. It's by Chris Whitaker. And if you follow me on socials, you saw me yammering about this book last, I guess it was late November. I read this book when we went on my family ski trip last year, if you guys remember this, and I was reading it in the back of the car while the kids were driving, and I could not put it down. And I'm putting it on socials like you guys. I know I'm supposed to be with my family right now, having this big trip we've been planning for 2 years, but I want to talk about this book. And so it is epic. It is a sweeping, epic novel. And so we've got Chris Whitaker today, and he is the author. He wrote another bestseller called We Begin at the End, and he's just a very specific kind of talent, one who can, it's hard to explain how dramatic and emotional and memorable his, not just the plot is, but the characters and the development and All the Colors of the Dark spans decades. And it will grab you by the throat and you will never forget it. And that is exactly how it was for me, which is why it's in book club. Because I knew 100% we had to have this in our midst. But what I want to tell you today, and Chris lives in London, or he lives in the UK, is that, I was so excited to meet him and to talk to him about this book. And the characters, they're so unforgettable, and the book is But what I did not expect was Chris to really talk about his own personal life in such a way that I just kept going, what? I mean, you will see me several times kind of just smack my hand on my forehead, and I don't even know how to set it up better. You're just going to have to listen. So at one point I told him, this interview is going so differently than I thought it was going to go. Just a fascinating person and life and story. And anyway, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here for more than one reason. I'm super glad for you to hear about this incredible book if you haven't already read it. And now I'm really glad for you to meet Chris, because what an extraordinary person. No wonder he is such a good storyteller. His life is a big story. So, all right, I've buried the lead enough. I mean, what else can I do? I'm glad you're here. Listen all the way to the end, because I was just telling my producer, right when we finished the episode, I'm like, right when I thought we cannot hear another big, huge, real life thing, and then he brings out another one at the end of the interview. I'm like, well, oh my God. So he's delightful. This interview could have gone on and on and on, I think, forever. I asked him no questions that I had planned. That's how this went. All right. Super glad you're here. You're going to be too. All right, everybody. Having said that, let me be the delighted host to welcome Chris Whitaker to the show. Thank you so much for squeezing this in. Now that I kind of understand what your next couple of weeks looks like, I am so grateful, and I could not wait to talk to you. Speaking of Colorado, so let me tell you how I know about you.
Mm-hmm.
So on that trip that I just referenced, where my boyfriend thought he was dying, that something was wrong with his lungs,
Yeah.
we were driving to the mountains for a ski trip with my whole family. So I have 5 kids, but they're grownish. So
I get it.
they're all mostly in their 20s. which,
Okay.
so we're road tripping and they get to drive. This is my prize for raising them, is that I don't
Mhm.
have to drive. And I
I
sit in the
get it.
back like a kid with my snacks
Right.
and my book.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I have a picture of me in the back. I'm frantically reading this book. So much so that I forgot to worry that we were going to die because my kids were driving. Like I forgot to even like micromanage from the back seat. I mean, I am. I
That
stayed up the
is the
first night.
highest. I think that's the highest praise that I can get. Like, we should put that on the front cover.
That if
Yeah.
that is not an endorsement, show me a better one.
Actually. Yeah,
Like,
I'm going to tell my publicist.
yeah,
Show
your
them
kids
that.
can drive you in a car through the mountains and you won't even be worried about it because you're too
Yes,
worried about your characters and what's going to
exactly.
happen to them.
Yeah. Perfect.
So I read that and stayed up that night until 2 in the morning to finish it because what was I going to do? Not know.
Hmm.
And then Pepper, who's on this with us, he's producing this episode. I think I sent a text maybe in the middle of the night, and I'm like, well, if we can't get this book in book club, then we're just going to quit book club. We're just going to fold. We're going to fold. Just shutter the doors. It's so good.
That
How
is
does it
nice.
feel, Chris, to have written such a banger?
So I never get nervous for anything. Yeah, like it's like this weird not superpower, because my ex-wife would say it was sociopathic. Like in it's like, yeah, it's a strange quality. But
Oh gosh.
when I finished writing All the Colors of the Dark, I was nervous for the first time ever because I knew that I had written the best book that I could possibly write. You know,
Yes.
there was not a single sentence that I would have changed.
Oh my
And
gosh.
with that, I think comes vulnerability. Because like
Ah,
normally if you're like if you've written another book and you finish and you move on to the next one and someone gives you a 1 star, you think, oh, maybe I could have done X, Y, and Z
sure.
different. But this time round, I thought if they don't like this one, I've got nothing left. Like at that
Oh my
time, I've
God,
got
that's
nothing. Like
the
there's no more that I
coolest
can do.
answer I've ever gotten. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, you knew it. You knew it in your bones. I,
Yeah,
and you were right. I mean, look at it. It's everywhere. Like, I cannot throw a stone and not hit somebody who does not want to talk about this book. It's
yeah,
so,
it's been
so
surreal.
good.
I think.
Um, and you deserve all this fuss around it and around you. You deserve to get to go to Paris tomorrow and talk about
Thank you.
it.
I struggle with that. I don't know if you're like that or if everyone is like that, but I struggle to feel worthy. You know, like
It's,
it feels like,
it's the writer's
yeah,
secret.
the
Like,
imposter syndrome.
totally. Yeah.
Mm,
I don't know if that ever completely erases or if it just gets a little better, but
yeah.
who among us can't just be like, oh God, I've duct taped this thing together and there it is, and I'm not nearly as great as you guys are saying.
Yeah. So I get it most when people ask me to do like a creative writing course to teach for like a guest um as a guest
Mm.
appearance or something, because I feel like and I can tell when I'm telling them how I do it, I can see the teacher kind of sweating because it's such a bad way to write a book. And I know that they don't want their students to go on and write like I do.
Oh,
They will never.
oh my gosh, that is such a good segue because I'm a nonfiction writer, so that's a different muscle. It pulls from a different well,
Yeah.
and um, but I'm obviously like a lifelong reader, and I'm a fiction like fan and novel. This is what I love to read, and so I am so fascinated with your creative process. Fascinated. And having interviewed so many novelists, there's just not, I don't think I've ever had the same answer twice. The way that people
Mhm.
approach plot and character and development, all of it is so wildly all over the map. I'd love to hear as much as you can encapsulate it. What's your deal? Like, how do you sort of approach? Because this is a big,
That's a big book.
sprawling book. Decades, characters, splinters. Just when I think the drama is over, it isn't. There's more drama. So I'd love to just, I don't know, there. I'm just going to volley that over to you and see how you do with it.
Well, I didn't set out to write such a sprawling,
Mm,
massive book. You know, I set out, I had a simple top line pitch that, I like to have it ready once. So when people say, "What's your book about?"
Yeah.
I had, and this is the way I pitched it to my editor. I remember I flew to New York because I was better at pitching face to face than giving her the pitch in an email,
Okay.
and I wanted to see it. So I thought I'd fly there and I'll tell her what the book's about. And I pitched it as two abducted teenagers fall in love in the pitch black basement they're being held in, having never seen each other. The boy escapes, can't find his way back to the girl. The police don't believe that she's real. They think that he made her up because of the trauma, but he knows in his heart that she is. So I had that. I had like three sentences to pitch all the colors of the dark. And I kind of set it up like a mystery. And then I began writing it, and it evolved into like this just epic book that, because I'd written a book before called We Begin at the End, and it followed a year in the life of a teenage girl called Duchess. We meet her at 13, we leave her at 14. And when I was beginning to write All the Colors of the Dark, everyone was messaging me saying, "What happens to Duchess? Is she okay?" And I knew it was a really important question. What happens to these kids that have had a difficult start in life, that have been through some kind of trauma? Are they okay? And I wanted to answer that with All the Colors of the Dark. So I knew that I would have to follow these kids, Patch and Saint, into adulthood. So right then at that moment, I thought, I'm going to miss my deadline for one, which I did by 2 years. And
Wow.
and I thought the book's going to span decades, and it's probably not going to fit neatly into a genre, because life never does. There might be a crime in it, but it's the least interesting thing in the book. It's going to probably be a coming of age story, definitely a story of friendship, definitely a look at family and first love, and then pirates and beekeepers as well.
Obviously. I mean, as
Obviously.
one writes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you started with the core of,
Mhm.
when did Saint come into the picture?
Patch and Saint, I began writing nothing but dialogue for the first year. I
God.
It felt, because I was writing during COVID, so the world felt slightly
Mm,
crazy.
mm,
And I was going back to the 70s, to before I was born, and I was going to Missouri, somewhere I'd never been before. And I had to meet these characters, so everything felt unknown,
mm,
um, and slightly alien. And I thought about how I get to know people in real life, like my partner and my friends. It's through conversation, it's through asking questions, listening to answers. And so I sat down, and for nearly a year I wrote nothing but dialogue
oh my
between Patch
gosh.
and Saint. And I got to know them so well that by the time year two came around, when I began to tell their story, I knew everything about these two kids. I knew exactly what Patch would do if he was walking to school and he saw a girl being abducted. I knew that he would rush straight in there, because he's full of heart, and he's also kind of reckless and never thinks of himself. He puts his own safety
Mm,
last, and so I knew he would rush in there. He would get taken instead of this girl.
mm,
And for Saint, for her part, I knew that she was fiercely intelligent. She
mm,
asked lots of questions. She had all these characteristics that probably weren't as celebrated in a girl in the 70s. So she learned to play them down, because it made her unpopular.
mm,
But I knew that when Patch went missing, Saint would never give up. Even when the police did, she would know, she would feel that her friend is still alive, because they have this bond, this
mm.
connection. And I've never written a book like that before, and I don't think I probably will again in that way.
I cannot
Um,
believe you wrote just dialogue for a year. That
yeah,
is commitment to the story. That is
yeah,
craftsmanship.
it just
Wow.
felt so important. Like, the story felt so important to me to tell.
That's amazing. The part in the basement is so harrowing. It's still stuck. I'm still carrying it around. And I read
Mhm,
this 6 or 7 months ago. Um, and I love the way that you just did not make any of it obvious. It was not obvious. I did not know which way it was going. I didn't know who was good or bad. At one point I was convinced that he was having a psychotic break. I was just
mhm,
sure of it. Like, that you were going to show us some really scary moment and we realized, oh my God, he broke. Um,
yeah.
there was no Grace. Grace was in his head. I the twist. And by the way, when this comes out, my book club will have we put this out on the last day of the month. So we tell our book club members, your blood's on your own hands if you haven't finished it. by the
Okay.
time our interview
Nice.
comes out. So we can talk
So
about it.
I never get to talk about the end,
Yeah,
so it's great.
exactly. We can talk about it. Spoilers are like that's on their own. So you obviously knew. Well, no, obvious. Maybe you went back and rewrote some of it. It seems like you obviously knew the arc of Grace and how we were going to find her because of the dialogue you gave her,
Mhm.
which we of course later find out. That she's been
Yeah.
dropping the breadcrumbs. Um,
Mhm.
did that become clear early on, or did that storyline also meander a little bit as you wrote?
I knew that she would be real. I
Okay.
needed that.
Yeah.
I needed that payoff for Patch. I
Mm,
needed, and I knew that readers were probably gonna, if they didn't give up on the story, they were gonna come on a 600-page journey with me.
mm,
And I wanted it to be worth it. I
mm-hmm,
wanted it to not feel in vain, and I didn't want them to feel cheated out of anything. And I didn't want Patch to have, in theory, wasted his life.
mm,
Because he sacrifices so much, and so does Saint, so does Norma, everyone
yeah.
connected to this crime that happens at the beginning of the book. Their lives are altered forever.
Mm,
That they divert and head off in a different direction, and I wanted it all to mean something. And I wanted everything to lead somewhere. Everything that you think is a throwaway in the story, every line that seems like it doesn't quite fit, it leads somewhere.
mm.
That like the entire story is a network that is leading you towards the answer. Whichever way you go, you will get there at the end. And so I knew that, and I knew I wanted to answer that question, and I wanted Patch to be okay, and I wanted to leave the readers with a sense of hope. I didn't want to write a bleak, depressing
Yeah.
book, and even the basement scenes, as hard as they were to write and to read, I wanted Grace to kind of take Patch's hand and lead him
Mm,
from the dark, mentally, and teach him and show him the world
mm,
through her eyes. And I didn't want to focus too much on how tough it was, because we had the conversation, me and my editor in the US, Amy, is a brilliant editor, Amy Einhorn. And she was
mm,
worried that it would be too much for readers, to have
mm,
this 13-year-old trapped in the dark for 300 days
mm,
is too difficult. And I knew then that I had a task. I had to write it in such a way that didn't feel too much. I wanted to say, so when they're sitting together and she is talking to him, and that she's teaching him about ballet and Paris, and leading him from there, I wanted it to feel like they were just two people getting to know the best parts of each other, and this bond was going to be formed.
I could hear you. I could listen to you talk about this all day long.
I could talk about it all day
I
long.
I am so grateful that you wrote it that way, because it is so satisfying. And
Hmm.
I know your readers are telling you, and I will join their ranks, which is to have such a twisty, turny thriller of a book for so much of it. It was so surprising to get to the end and cry, which I did,
Hmm.
because there's so much heart in it. It is thrilling, and it is mystery
Yeah.
and murder, and it's got all those elements that we love.
Hmm.
But with so much heart that sometimes a thriller just doesn't worry with. It doesn't bother picking
Yeah.
up that mantle at all. And so this one of love and heartbreak and the kids and then their kids, it just goes on, and we're rooting for them so much. So
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
you
I wanted
could have
people to
told
be.
me anything about Patch, and I've been like, give him a free pass. Like he had a hard time.
He
I was
did.
just so on his side.
It's so funny though, because I was doing a book club not that long ago, and the consensus was there was about 30 women that had read the book, and they all saw Patch as a user, like he had used Saint, and,
Oh
and
my
it was a
God, that was
completely
not.
different way of seeing it. Yeah, but it was like, I love that about books, that two
You're
people can
right.
read the same book and see very different things.
You're right.
But they thought that he manipulated her and didn't do it on purpose, but she gave up way too much for him, and he was a taker. And
Isn't that
I
funny?
definitely didn't see that. Yeah, I didn't see it, but it was really interesting.
Yeah. No, that's not how I perceived. That's not how I perceived him either. But you're right. Once you hand a book over to your readers, they will do with it
Yeah,
what they will,
yeah.
and they will reckon with it however they want to and analyze
Mhm.
it however they decide to, and that's a rather nerve-wracking part of being a writer for sure. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. I Can you talk some about I'd like to know, because you're so gifted at this. Did you forever know that you wanted to be a writer? Was this seeded in you super early?
It was not.
Oh
It
my God, I'm
was
shocked to hear that.
like, yeah, so I was a reader since I was really little. Like my mum and
Mm,
dad divorced when I was a kid, and my mum used to work like long shifts and nights and things like that. So she gave me a key to the house when I was about 8.
mm.
And but I hated going home because it was dark and I was
Yeah.
scared. So I used to go to the library, to my local library, and I'd sit there and read. And I would read until she finished work and she'd come and pick me up and take me home because the library was open late in London.
Mm,
And so I was a reader from a really young age, but I was also not academic in any way, and
mm.
I went to a really rough school in London, and no one became a writer. Like it wasn't a thing.
Sure.
Amy Winehouse went to my school, and but they took her out and took her to a stage school because she was so talented.
Mm,
But she was the only person I knew that kind of went into the arts. But no, I didn't like I messed up really badly at school.
mm.
Like I left school with no qualifications at all. And I remember I got a grade N in economics, which my economics teacher said that the N stands for no future.
Oh,
So yeah,
jeez.
yeah, so brutal, brutal.
God.
Yeah, so I had no real idea what I wanted to do, and I just thought I would try everything. I had that
Mm,
kind of naive teenage quality, where you believe that everything will be okay. I'll end up doing a job that pays me loads of money and I'll be really
sure.
happy. You
Yeah.
should have that when you're a kid,
Yeah.
you should have that belief. But I just didn't know how to get there. And so I thought I'll do as many jobs as I can and something, I'll find something. And so I worked in a bar. I did loads of bar work, which I loved. I don't know if you've ever worked in a bar, but it's really fun.
I believe you.
Yeah, because you get to listen to people's problems and talk to them and while they're getting drunk. And then I did some sales and things like that. And I was working as a real estate agent, like an office junior, and I was out in London. It was about 9:30 in the morning, and someone came up to me and asked to borrow my cell phone. And I knew that I was going to get mugged because it was such a strange request.
Mm,
And I'd also, because I'd been to quite a rough school and had quite a tough group of friends, I'd been in tons of fights when I was a kid.
mm.
So I thought I'll fight the guy instead of giving him my phone.
Okay.
And what's the worst that could happen? And so we had a fight, me and this man, me wearing a suit, and it must have looked really strange. But he pulled out a knife, and it was a really big knife. And I remember thinking he won't use it. There's no way he'll use it. It's too big, the knife. And then I thought he was punching me, and he stepped back and stared at me, and I was wearing a white shirt, and I looked down. It was completely red because he had stabbed me 3 times. But the knife was so big it had gone in my side and come out my back, and um, and I still refused to give him the phone. And then he went to stab me in the chest. So he would have killed me for this phone without a doubt. And I caught the knife, and he cut through the palm of my hand, and I dropped the phone, and he picked up the phone and ran off. And so then I found myself standing on this street in London with no phone to call for help and no one around because everyone was at work. So I got myself back to my car, and I remember looking back up the street and just seeing that I'd left a trail of blood because I was bleeding so badly. And so I put a hand over my side and I drove myself to hospital. And I remember getting to the car park, and when you're about to black out and you start to see stars, I was just about to black out as I got to the car park. So they came out and got me, the doctors, and took me inside and stitched me back together again. And strangely, that's when the real problems began, because I remember the consensus was everyone kept telling me I was lucky, but I remember, and I know what they meant because I could have been killed, but I remember feeling really unlucky.
Mm,
I remember, I was on the wrong street at the wrong time, and I had a chance encounter with this man that kind of bulldozed his way into my life and wrecked everything,
mm,
because all of a sudden, I couldn't sleep, and I
mm,
couldn't read anything. I couldn't watch TV. I was really struggling, and I didn't know about PTSD. I'd never heard of it, didn't know what the symptoms were. I definitely didn't want to ask for help
mm,
because that my dad and my friends, like I love my dad, but he kind of didn't know how to handle it.
Mm.
And my friends did that toxic male thing where they slap you on the back and you're expected to get on with it. And
Yeah.
at 19, I didn't know how to get on with it.
Mm.
So I was drinking too much and I was taking drugs and I took a lot of sleeping pills to try and get through the night. And I just kind of unraveled. I remember like looking in the mirror and not really recognizing myself and just didn't feel like me anymore. And this went on for quite a while. And eventually I found my way to the library because the library was my safe place when I was a
Mm.
kid. And I borrowed a self-help book on writing as therapy.
Oh my
And it
gosh.
really suited me because I didn't want to talk to anyone. So I could sit down and I could do these creative writing exercises, and there were these rules involved where there were three rules. You had to write about the trauma, but change the people involved to fictional characters. So it was kind of
Mm.
like creative writing.
Yeah.
You had to set the writing the last place you were happy. My dad took us to Disney when I was 8 years old, and so my happy place was America. So when I sat down to write, I could escape mentally. So I could leave London behind, and you had to change the outcome to something you could control.
Mm.
So that was my first taste of writing when I was 19, but still, it was kind of writing for survival. Like I didn't want to be a writer. I didn't think I had those skills. I didn't think that was a career that was open to someone like me with a background like I had.
Okay. First of all, I did not see that story coming.
Yeah,
That
strange one.
is unbelievable how you found your way back to the library and into
Yes.
that book you checked out.
Hmm.
Uh, wow, that is stunning. And so you started feeling your way back to the surface through writing.
Did. It took about a year, and
Yeah,
it wasn't a quick fix. I mean, I think
sure.
about a month after I started, I was really drunk and I flipped my car onto its roof,
Mm.
and I have a scar down my cheek where a piece
Wow.
of glass went through my cheek. And I remember my parents were really disappointed in me
Mm.
because I've been drink driving, and I had the opportunity then to tell them, all is not as it appears. I'm not
Mm.
just being an idiot.
Mm.
Something is badly wrong, but I still chose writing instead because it was easier because my mum was a tough single mum and I never saw her complain about anything.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was tough.
So at this point, you're 20 or so,
Yeah. Hmm.
and it's one thing to have discovered writing as such an incredible processing tool, which it is. And
Hmm.
that's accessible to anybody. Anybody can
Yes,
pick up a
for sure.
pen
Yeah.
and use the page to process grief or trauma or figure out what they think about something. It is another thing entirely to write this shit. You
Hmm.
you you found your deal. You found your gift.
I think
You had something extra. Your economics teacher can just F off. Who's laughing now? You know what I mean? Who's laughing now? He's just
yeah.
still back at the shitty school, right?
Yes.
Look at you. You're going to
Yeah.
Paris tomorrow.
Hmm.
And so I'd love to hear you bridge that forward because it's not a simple leap to, and then I became a
No.
novelist.
Hmm.
Um, what
I
did
didn't.
you, how did you move forward at that point?
So I think I was about 21 and I'd been doing writing as therapy for a year. I needed to do something with my life. I put the paper down, the pen down, didn't want to write anymore. I felt like I was done with it. And then it just so happened that I picked up a newspaper and I read an interview with a stockbroker, and there was a picture of this guy with a Ferrari. And he had a Ferrari, and I've been obsessed with Ferraris since I was a kid, and I really wanted a Ferrari, so I thought
Sure.
I'm going to be a stockbroker,
Sure.
which my brother found hilarious because I had an N in economics and my maths is terrible.
That's right.
So
In.
I paid for my stockbroker exams, my FSA exams with my credit card and passed them because I worked really hard. And then I went into London and annoyingly found out that I couldn't get a job anywhere because you needed a degree and I didn't
Tricky.
have one. So
Mm.
everyone was throwing me out, like Barclays, HSBC, all the big banks threw me out. And I found a smaller company that gave me a job as a junior broker.
Mm.
And it was my job to do client entertaining, which was going out and drinking and taking drugs and things I was really
Mm.
good at back then.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
um,
Your other
and
skill set.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
So I did that for a few years, and it was fun. It was for context though, my life, I there is a strip club in London called Stringfellows, a famous strip club, and I went in there. I was in there so much that the dancers came to my wedding because I was such good friends with
Jeez.
them. So if you
Jeez.
if you look at my wedding photos, the back row of the church is
Oh
the
God.
dancers from Stringfellows.
Sure. Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that was my
Mm-hmm.
life, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was fine. I was having fun. I was doing well, but I really wanted to work on the trading desk. So the
Mm,
traders, they take the money the company makes, reinvest it. You're kind of at the sharp end. You
yeah.
trade directly into the stock market, and I begged my boss for about a year,
Mm.
and eventually he said, if you lose $20,000, you stop trading. That is your limit.
Wow.
And I remember telling my friends and my family, my parents, I'm going to be a trader. Everyone was really proud of me, really
Mm-hmm.
happy. And on Monday morning, I lost $2 million.
No.
And
No. This
I did,
can't be true.
yeah, I did it in the first 10 minutes of trading. Yeah.
Oh my
And so I was sitting there with this massive loss. And I remember my friend worked in the back office. So I panicked and I said to my friend, if you hide the loss, I'll make it back, which is illegal.
God. Sure.
And he agreed because he was one of my friends.
This
And
is
so
just
yeah, so for the next 3 months, I went into work and lost a bit more money every single day,
oh my God.
and eventually came back in, and there was a boardroom. I remember there was a glass wall, and I could see into the boardroom, and there was a big glass table, and the bosses were sitting around it with the lawyers, and there was an empty seat at
Oh
the end of the
God.
table for me.
Oh, I'm so
And
stressed.
yeah, so I sat down, and they knew everything. But they cut me a deal because I'd started to make a tiny bit of money back. I was getting to the hang of it, and they said if you pay back half of it yourself, we won't go to the police.
Oh my God.
So I signed a contract, and I remember that day I was 24, and I was getting the train home, and I was in $1 million of debt,
Jeez.
and I was getting married at the time, and cause we were having a big wedding because everyone thought I was this successful
Yeah.
stockbroker,
Yeah.
and so I didn't tell anyone what was going on, and put everything on my credit card, got myself into more trouble, and that's when I went back to writing for the first time in 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
I picked up writing again to cope with the stress of the debt, and it was for the second time in my life. It was
Mm.
writing that saved me, that got me through that difficult time. And I did pay the money back. It took
Oh
about
my
5 years,
gosh.
and I still have the piece of paper that tells me I'm debt free, because I'm going to frame it and stick it on the wall. And yeah, and then I was nearly 30, and in theory had everything I thought that I wanted, everything that I thought someone like me couldn't have achieved. I had a big house and a nice car, and I was
Mm.
married, and I had a kid and another one on the way,
Mm.
and I was miserable, like
Mm.
utterly, utterly miserable, and I hated it. I hated working in the city. I felt like I hadn't found my place,
Mhm.
and then I read a book called The Last Child by an author called John Hart, an American author, and I loved it. When you read the right book at the right
I
time.
do.
Yeah, so I read this book, and it's this beautiful missing child mystery. And I
Mhm.
read this interview with John Hart that night after I finished it, and I found out that he was a successful lawyer, and he one day just quit his job to write, to
Mm.
do what made him happy.
Mm.
So the next day I quit my job. Um,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
and then I came home and I
Oh my
told my then
gosh.
wife that I'd quit my job and we were going to have to sell our house and sell our
Oh my
car.
gosh.
And she was a
She's
student, so we had no other money coming in. And I did it. I quit my job. We sold the house, sold the car, and I began writing. And then I worked 3 jobs for 10 years while I tried to become a writer. Yeah.
this interview is going better than I expected. Your
Yeah, it's a really
life,
strange journey. A really
your
strange.
life is
Yeah.
so it's a novel. You just pull from your experience, and any
I-
given story you've just told me just now could turn into this epic story if you just did your little tricks that you learned from the library, just assign different
Yes.
names to it, drop it in a different location. I mean, wow. So for 10 years, you
Hmm.
just scrapped it together while you figured out how to become a novelist.
I did, but I had all this guilt as well because I didn't see my kids.
Mm,
I missed like sports day and
mm,
Christmas concerts and birthdays and things like that. I was never around because I was working constantly, and I
mm,
felt like I'd done this really selfish thing for myself.
mm,
But I was doing an event with Nita Prose, the author,
mhm,
and she reframed it in my brain. She said, if you're on an aeroplane and the plane is going down, and the oxygen masks drop
mm,
down, you're with your kids. What do you do first? You
mm.
put on your own mask, because then you're able to help your family.
Sure.
And I felt like quitting the city,
Mm.
that was what was me putting on my oxygen mask.
Wow.
I
Um,
didn't.
that's amazing. Can you talk about what it was like when your first book was published and it became clear that you were gonna make it? Like,
It was strange because I wrote a book called Tall Oaks, and it was published, and I was paid almost next to no money for it. I signed a 2-book deal for such little money I
mhm,
couldn't quit any of my jobs.
mhm.
It's so hard to make money as a
Yeah, I
writer,
started like
as an
that
author.
too.
Yeah, and so I did this
Mm,
2-book deal, and Tall Oaks did well critically. It won an award, but commercially
mm,
didn't sell. Same with book two.
mm,
And then book three came around, and I signed another 2-book deal for next to no money again.
mm.
'Cause I wanted to just keep writing because I didn't know what else to do because I felt better mentally for the
Yeah.
first time. And I had this file on my computer, and it was called Duchess
Mm.
because that was the character that I'd written when I was 19 after I'd been stabbed. And so
Oh, wow.
for years when I was doing
Mhm,
writing as therapy, I was writing bits and pieces of this girl's life
mm,
because one of the rules of the trauma writing was that you had to make yourself the opposite. So I was a teenage boy living in London. I wrote about a teenage girl living in the US because the US was my happy place.
got it.
So I went back, and I wanted to finish her story, but books one and two, I didn't feel skilled enough as a writer to
Mm,
write the rest of her story, and I didn't I didn't know if I could do it,
mm,
and I didn't really want to.
mm.
It felt like, as strange as it sounds, it's this book about this teenage girl in America, but it felt so intensely personal to me.
Sure, of course.
I didn't feel ready to go back because I remembered where I was
Of
mentally
course.
when I was writing those scenes.
Mm,
But I went back and I spent about 5 years finishing that story, and it became the book We Begin at the End that was a New York Times
mm.
bestseller and completely changed my life.
Yeah.
20 years after, yeah, it was 20 years almost to the day after being stabbed, that book
Wow.
published, and yeah, and everything changed from there.
Mm, that's amazing. I appreciate you telling that story. Um, that this was a long road. You were not an
Yeah.
overnight success. This did
No.
not come without great cost
Mhm.
and sacrifice. And you kind of scrabbled your way to it. Um, and now here you are, which is so amazing. How has it felt? Because this came out last year, so it's
Mhm.
not been out a super long time. How has it felt to receive all of this reader feedback for this book? Because it is everywhere. You obviously know that you're everywhere. You're now a person
Yeah.
who travels all around the world and does book tours, and you probably can't walk down the street now. And so I'm curious how that has felt because it's two different energies. Writing is so solitary, it's so private, particularly you. I mean, you've gone inward to locate so many tender places in your own story, obviously,
Yeah.
to write with such feeling and emotion and honesty and truth. And then you've got to flip a switch and become a person at the front of the room that everybody is looking at, and you're like holding the room, and it's such social energy. And so I'd
Yeah.
love to hear how that feels. Do you like both those spaces? Do you have to work hard or no? Because you're obviously
Um,
social. You can clearly do this.
I
But
can do this, but
mhm,
doing it is still, it was difficult because so Patch is very close to me. Like when I was writing the Patch scenes where he's in the basement, I found them incredibly difficult to write. I would stop writing after an hour and write something else, like them going to prom or sharing their first kiss. And I didn't realize why it was so hard until I looked back at my life, and I was kind of mapping my life from now all the way back to where it began. And I think it began when I was 10. My mum was dating someone that was like really nice to my grandparents, and everyone loved him, very charismatic, very funny. But when he'd been drinking, he was very violent with me.
Mm.
And one night he came into my room and he pulled me out of bed by my arm, and we heard the bone break, like a snapping sound. And he kind of panicked and sent me back to my bedroom and told me to stay there until the morning, and in the morning to tell my parents that I'd done it playing football. And I was so scared of this guy that I did it. You know, I had
Wow.
this long night as a 10-year-old, impossibly long night with a broken arm, lying in the dark. And and then the next day I told my parents I did it playing football, and that was a lie that I stuck to for maybe, God, I told my dad about it about 5 years ago, what really happened. And
Holy shit.
yeah, and then like maybe a month after that, I was in my back garden, and he stuck his cigarette into my leg, and I have a perfect cigarette scar in my thigh.
Mm.
And he said to my mum that I'd bumped into him, and I knew that I hadn't,
Mm.
but I also knew I was too scared of him to say anything.
Mm.
So I knew that I learned all these toxic habits when I was a kid. You
Yeah.
know, when if something bad happens, you don't tell anyone. If you
Yeah.
lose £1 million at work, you don't tell anyone.
Mm.
You deal with it yourself. And I also hated feeling like a victim as a kid. So on the surface, it sounds crazy. If someone pulls out a knife, you give them your phone. If they stab you, you give them your phone. But
Mm.
I hated that feeling so much
Yeah.
of being a powerless kid that I would have rather kept swinging probably until he killed me. So I
Mm.
learned all of these traits that Patch has.
Mm.
But I also found my way to art,
Mm.
just like Patch did.
Yeah.
You know, like Patch, if this terrible trauma hadn't happened to Patch, he wouldn't have picked up a paintbrush
Right.
and discovered he was a gifted artist and completely changed his life. So
Mm.
when we were talking about doing PR for the book beforehand, I needed to make a decision whether I was honest about where the story came from and where Patch came from,
Yeah.
or whether I made something up.
Mm.
And for the first part, it's quite hard to lie about something convincingly for a year and over at like 150 events or
Yeah.
something. And secondly, I'd spent most of my life feeling slightly ashamed of my childhood, and
Mm.
slightly in that way that kids do. You feel like you've done something wrong,
Of
something
course.
to deserve this. You know, the guy used to tell me I was a brat all the time,
Mm.
and so I would modify my behavior as a kid, you know, and I still do it now. I still like I can ask my partner if I can get a glass of water and things like
Mm.
that. I have these traits that I can't shake, and I have to physically stop myself
Mm.
asking for permission to take a shower and things like that because I don't want to impose any on anyone.
Mm.
And so I wanted to remember this when I was writing, and I have this reckless streak as well, you know, and I've been in and out of trouble and arrested a few times, and um and I have all these traits that Patch has that I gave to Patch. And
Mm.
so I wanted to be honest about it. So when
Yeah.
I sit down and do these events, I just tell people everything.
Mm.
And the reaction has been really, you know, people are innately kind and good.
They are.
And that's what I
That's
found.
right. And everybody walks in the door with their own pain and loss and it doesn't matter how they look, it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter, none of it matters. Like that's just true. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I know I am always that draws me to you. That does not push me away from you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
But
That
I think until I'd written this book and until I'd done the touring and the events, there was almost a feeling like I was the only person in the room. Like everyone else is over there and I'm over here.
yeah.
And even though everyone's talking to me and celebrating the book, I still am the one that is very different to everyone else. But I
Mm.
think the people that come up to me afterwards, the people that
Yeah.
email me and write to me every day that can identify with the character or something in the book with Saint or with Patch, I think I began to realize that everyone has
That's
something in
right.
their past that defines them, and it's not always something good.
That's
And it
right.
can be something that makes you stronger, and it can be something that leads you down a path you never thought you would be on. Like I'm
That's
here
right.
talking to you now,
Mm.
and it's kind of mind blowing. You know, how
Mm.
did I get here from being that 10-year-old?
That's right.
Um, and that's why, you know, I'm just kind of in love with storytelling and the
Totally.
power, yeah, the power of a story.
Mm.
It just kind of blows my mind.
Okay. Well, I am so happy for you. And I am so proud of you for taking all those pieces of your life and turning them, spinning them into gold and finding a
Thank you.
way to use all of your experiences at this level and with this kind of reach. And so that's extraordinary and it's special and it's rare. And so, how fantastic. I am delighted to have met you. And thank you so much for sharing all that with me. I just
Of
certainly
course.
did not know all of this. And I feel like, well, I'll write whatever you, I'll read whatever you write for the rest of your life. So, speaking of, I know that you're certainly probably neck deep in the next thing already. Is it too soon?
Yeah.
Can we know anything about it?
It is called The Timekeeper, and it is a big sweeping love story that looks at the idea of it looks at time and fate, and asks how much control we really have over either of those two things. And
Mm.
yeah,
Is it modern? Is it modern day?
it's set in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Nice
Yeah.
era. Is
Yeah,
it
I,
in
I
London?
generally tend to. No, it's in upstate New York, somewhere I've never been before, as is my custom. So,
Yes, that's true. Um, right, right. Because who wouldn't, want to set a book in Missouri?
exactly,
When they're British, that makes sense.
exactly.
Well, when does that come out, by the way?
I'm a long way,
Okay,
but I'm
you're
so
just
far
pecking away at
behind.
it right now. Okay,
I reckon a few years at least,
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately.
that's fine. We'll wait. We'll wait. If
Yeah.
this was worth a 2-year delay on that
Hmm.
deadline, these publishers know what they're getting. Don't
Yeah. I
they
hope
can't
so.
act
Or
shocked.
maybe you could tell them from me.
I'll write a note on your behalf.
Thank you.
Okay, last question I'd love to hear, and you may not have time for this right now based on everything you just said, but we'd love to hear if you are reading anything that you are enjoying or that has stuck with you, either recently or maybe like an old favorite.
So I was really late to the party, but I read A Prayer for Owen Meany by John
Oh,
Earl.
yeah. Gosh.
Not that long ago,
Yeah.
and it's so good.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing a book signing, I ask people when they're in the line, I ask them to recommend me a book, and the ones that pop up most frequently, I then go and read.
Yeah.
And Owen Meany came up again and again
Yeah.
and again, and it's such a special book. It's like
Mm.
it's right up there with my all-time favorites.
Yeah.
That and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow,
Yep.
by Gabrielle Zevin. I loved
It's
it. I
brilliant.
love a book about friendship.
Yeah.
It was just so beautifully done.
I
Yeah,
know.
loved it.
Same for me. People are always recommending books for me because I'm a reader and I have, big book club and all of it. And I remember when Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow kept coming up over and over. And I read the synopsis and I'm like, I don't know. Like,
My
not really
dad
in
was
my
like that. I was trying to pitch
genre.
it. Yeah, the video game thing. It was
Yeah.
so
I'm like,
difficult to pitch.
uh,
Yeah,
oh, just such an epic book. So beautifully done. And you don't,
yeah.
yeah, it exceeds far beyond whatever's on the surface of the
Mhm.
mechanics of the story into the people.
Yeah, I'm constantly on the lookout for those
Yeah,
those books that you never forget.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Well, as you can well imagine, this is just making a huge splash in the book club, and
Excellent.
I, I'm always tickled because you've handed me a win. Because just like you just said, I know when I read a book and I go, oh, this is gonna slay in book club.
Yeah.
And that was me in the back seat while my 19-year-old drove us through the mountains, And so lucky me to have found you. Lucky all of us that you just kept writing and you powered through. So it's amazing. You're a brilliant writer. So
Thank you.
delighted that you have found your path and it is obviously set now because none of us will let you off the hook, but thanks for being here today. I hope your tour is just stunning and that you love it and it's enjoyable and you just get to really feel the effects of handing such a incredible story to the world.
Thank you.
You
That's
deserve
such a
it.
nice thing to say. Thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris. Happy travels tomorrow. Enjoy Paris. Thanks for being
Thank you,
here.
Jen. Thank you very much.